building various kinds of distributed systems and different types of APIs. Obviously, having spent a lot of time in this space, I'm very passionate about APIs. But ironically, one thing that I learned about APIs through all of the time is that APIs don't really matter. Let me explain myself. You see, individual APIs just provide a small part of the solution. They can be very useful, but usually they are incomplete. The real value comes from building API platforms, which are a collection of logically interconnected APIs that deliver holistic business value. For instance, an accounting API would be a single destination for applications and the systems that want to do something related to the accounting. Similarly, enterprise customer platform is where all of the systems and applications go in a large enterprise to query any data about the customer or to modify any data about the customer. And I believe that in a modern enterprise, or more specifically in modern financial institutions, the technology space should really be a bunch of such well-designed API platforms, all working in unison to power the business in all of its digital and analog needs. So that's what the destination should look like. Unfortunately, the reality is that there's a lot of regret in technology these days. You should be seeing a recent report from Gartner that shows that 73% of all tech acquisitions, based on their research, have ended in regret even before the project was started. And only 13%, 13% of these acquisitions were successful or led to no regret once the project was completed. Obviously, the statistics and the research that Gartner has done is on the buying side, but having worked in large enterprises, I think that we all know the homegrown technologies are not much better than what we see on the buying side from the statistics. So there's a lot of regret in technology today. If we want to reduce the amount of regret in technology and to build the platforms that last for a very long time, I believe what we need to focus on is less how to build things the right way, maybe less about agile methodology or data governance or other things that we have been obsessed by, and really start to worry more about, are we building the right thing? So we have mastered all of these ways to build things the right way, but at the end of the day, are we building the right thing? Let's talk about that. This is what I want this talk to be about. I want to share three main lessons that we have learned having worked for a number of large financial institutions and other kinds of organizations in the past many years. So I want to share three main lessons and see if anybody else can relate to them. Lesson number one. You see, a lot of times when we're building platforms or in the large enterprise, they can be known as enterprise systems, we don't pay enough attention to the customer needs, and we sometimes just take the requirements, which are really the customer wants, at the face value. Let me explain it with an analogy, right? So many of you may know the joke that if Henry Ford had asked about their early customers what they wanted, nobody would say a car because nobody knew what a car was, and most people would tell them, we want faster horses, right? So it's a funny joke, which probably Ford never said, but regardless, I think the moral of the story here is that those people that were interviewing the early car adopters should have never asked the customers what they wanted, but maybe have tried to understand what the needs of the customers were. So let's imagine that we're talking to somebody in late 19th century or early 20th century. Maybe they are a farmer that delivers milk to the market, and maybe the market is far away, that delivering it with horses and cart, maybe it takes a day. So a fair amount of milk in the warmer weathers gets spoiled. So that's their job to be done, right? So they need to deliver the milk to the market, and it gets spoiled because it takes just too long. If the Ford employees understood this need, right, underlying need and job to be done, they could have probably guessed that the solution here is not necessarily faster horses, but they have an engine and they can build a really nice truck which can also deliver the same milk, but maybe in an hour instead of a day, right? So it's important to talk to your customers, because if you don't talk to your customers, you don't understand their needs. They could have built a sports car or maybe a Cybertruck, right? I'm just kidding. But they would have built something that's not really a good truck, that doesn't get the job done. And also, if they did talk to them but asked about the wants rather than the needs, they may also have built something wrong. So it's really important to talk about the needs of the customers and less about the wants. The other analogy is specific. So it's a good advice about jobs to be done for any person that's building any product, including the API products. Furthermore, if we're building API platforms, there's additional mindset that is required to build long-lasting API platforms, which is we need to have a platform mindset, which means we want to make sure that we're not just solving the needs of one customer, but all of our customers, right? And an analogy I would use here is, let's say one of our customers comes and tells us that they want a strawberry ice cream. And another comes and tells us they want a banana ice cream. The other comes and tells us that they would like some frozen yogurt. If you have a platform mindset, then we shouldn't be just creating a strawberry ice cream manually for one customer and banana ice cream for another, etc. That model just does not scale. So somebody with a platform mindset would probably say, hey, what can I build that makes then creating all of those different kinds of ice cream and ice cream products easy? Maybe they create an ice cream machine that just really scales the problem and provides the economies of scale, right? So don't build don't just do the ice creams, build the ice cream machines is another lesson that's very important for the platform builders. And last but not least, the needs that we analyze and the needs that are common that we implement in the platform, we also need to make sure that they are timeless and not just the temporary needs. So we'll talk more about that in the second lesson. So the second lesson of building long-lasting API platforms is sometimes we centralize the implementation of the functionality that does not last over time, right? So when we think about the return on investment and the cost of a platform, we really need to think about it in time. Unfortunately, the typical building process for an enterprise system or an API platform in a large corporation goes something like this. On a specific moment in time, somebody will look at some collection of needs that many customers within the enterprise have, right? And they will come up with capabilities that are shared by dozens or hundreds of applications. They will implement them centrally. There's a huge cost saving because everybody need to implement those things on their own, and if they were implemented centrally, huge celebrations, people get nice bonuses, get promotions, everybody is happy in that moment in time. And then you fast forward 6 months from there, and suddenly one of the customers of the platform may have a need to change something in the way that one of the capabilities work. And that could be a potential of millions of dollars of revenue for that customer. However, now that the functionality they are trying to change is in the central platform, they cannot just go ahead and change. Like the change itself may be just 2 weeks of the developer time, but they need to go to a central platform now, and platform has its own roadmap, and they may say like, come back in 3 months because we don't have time now. So raise your hand if anybody has experienced something like that in your large corporation, right? So it happens all the time, unfortunately. And not only the platform can slow you down by multiple months because they have their own roadmap, but even when they implement it, the change may be backwards incompatible. So now they have to go to all of those hundreds of platform customers and have them change their applications to make sure that the new version of the platform does not break everybody. If those kind of highly coordinated changes happen all the time, if your change that should have taken 2 weeks starts taking 3 months, 6 months, eventually that central platform that was saving everybody time and money and was the beloved thing will become the most hated bottleneck in the enterprise that everybody starts to regret. And that happens all the time, and that's part of big part of the reason why all enterprise systems have a pretty short longevity, and eventually they all become the problem even though they were solving the problem initially. So analyzing things in time and making sure that we avoid implementing things in the platforms that may change frequently is a very important criteria to evaluate what we do put into the platform and not. If you so general rule is don't put in the platform the functionalities that are very likely to change in the future, even if today they are very useful and are used by many. If you do have to implement that centrally, however, and that also can be a case, then the advice is to make that functionality extensible, right? So there's probably a reusable part, a long-term reusable part of the functionality, and there may be another part that probably will change in time. And in your design, you should try to make long-term functionality part of the platform's implemented functionality, and anything that can change per customer in time, make it extensible. And when we make them extensible in the customer-specific logic, also let's make sure that the way they can extend it is through APIs and through self-service, so that if customer does have a need in the future to modify something, it is extensible, it is customizable, and they don't need to talk to the platform team or anybody else, because that change can be accomplished through a set of self-service APIs. So that will definitely create more longevity for the platform and avoid the dependency and coordination nightmare that usually leads to the demise of the centralized platforms. And the last thing is, a lot of times when we build centralized platforms or API platforms, we don't pay enough attention to the emotional aspect of the stakeholders and customers of the platform. What I mean by that is APIs in general, and specifically API platforms, are a little bit of a backend system, right? So, I mean, if you're a developer and you're using something like Postman, then you're probably very comfortable playing with APIs. But for most people, APIs are kind of backend engine that does not have a user interface. It's not very easy to play with, right? So it's not the same as like playing with a new iPhone or iPad or an Android device where you can do things and get the feedback, get the feeling of how things work, right? So APIs are more like underlying technology. And because of that, it is very important to actually create specific user interfaces for the API platforms that you're building, right? So if you're building an accounting API platform, how about create some user interface through which people can very easily interact with those set of APIs? And when I mean people, I mean regular CPAs, regular accountants who don't have software engineering degrees. Let them run some numbers, see if the interest calculation works the way they expect, show some debugging information so they can understand what goes behind the scenes, give them the user interface that will never be deployed to the end customers, right? So when you're working with a financial system, they don't show all the calculations behind. But before we get to the customer experience, we also need to create experiences for people who can tell us if the business logic of the API platform is correct or not. And it's very important to make that interaction easy, and it's very important to give this key business stakeholders early opportunity to opine about the API platform, as well as to start admiring what we're building and get emotionally attached and become the champions of what we're building. So invest in stakeholder emotion is often ignored aspect of building successful API platforms, but very, very important. Okay, so we're almost at time for this talk, and as we wrap it up, I wanted for you to leave with one single thought, the most important takeaway from this talk, which is, the time of wild forest of APIs at large companies is over. Going forward, it will be all about well-designed API platforms that deliver holistic business value. And as we learn how to develop these API platforms, the most important thing to remember is to worry less about how to build them in the right way and really, really start concentrating on, do we build the right thing? Thank you very much.